I'm with Grant Hawley today. Grant is, because he's such an international man of mystery, we didn't feel like we should show his picture. So, Grant, say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello. My name's Grant Hawley. I've been free grace for quite a while, since college. I'm 42 now. And before that, I was part of a lordship church and got in a little trouble when I became free grace there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, myself and two other guys were actually booted from the church.
Well, I did not know that.
So
So, did you guys start speaking about your kind of the change in your thinking, or what led to that?
we got a little group together that was just a few friends, and we were trying to study out the issue to kind of see where we stood on it.
Yeah.
It was sort of an internal discussion between about five of us, and they didn't like us even talking about it.
Really?
Yeah, they
Wow.
heard that we were becoming free grace, and they didn't talk to us about it at all. They just said goodbye. You're not
Wow.
welcome here. Yeah.
My goodness. Well, so did you have somebody in that group that was already free grace, or like what led to
Um,
that? How did that start?
yeah. We were leaders with the high school group, and it's a big church. There was like 30 leaders,
Okay.
and there was like a I don't know, like a fellowship get together at the very beginning of the year, and I didn't know anything about free grace. I had read, Chafer and Ryrie and those guys, but
Okay.
it was never put out to me really super clearly. And I saw a guy that I hadn't met who was sitting by himself reading a book when it was, supposed to be social time. So I went over to him and introduced myself and just said, "What you reading?" And he was reading "Absolutely Free" by Zane Hodges.
Ah, okay.
And so he was already completely convinced of that. And when he started talking to me about it, it made sense to me as well.
Okay.
This following summer, so that when we first met, it was like, I don't know, August or something. And the following summer, we decided we were going to, talk it all out. And we put together a reading list that included the Reign of the Servant Kings and some Zane Hodges, but it also included some
Ah,
MacArthur and Arthur Pink and some articles from the Master's Seminary and things
okay.
like that. And we got together and started discussing those things on a weekly basis. We had a reading assignment each week, was something lordship and something free grace. And
Wow.
there
Okay.
was it was me and him and two other leaders
Okay.
from the high school group that were in there.
Yeah.
And then we allowed one graduate to come. He was out of the church youth group, and so we said he could come because he wanted to.
Yeah.
He became
Wow.
convinced of free grace through the readings, and he told his dad that he was, convinced of free grace, and his dad had been reading The Gospel According to Jesus by John MacArthur.
MacArthur. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so I
Wow.
guess the dad went and told the pastor, and the pastor just said, "Okay, these guys are all out." So
Wow. Oh man.
yeah.
Well, so was there anybody in the group that didn't become convinced, or was it a unanimous decision across the board?
There was one person who just kind of hadn't really come down on either side yet.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, so let's fast forward a little bit, or not fast forward. Let's walk through your story a little bit past that. Okay, so you
hmm
become free grace, and then what transpires from there? Because you're kind of a known name now. I mean, like a lot of free grace people know who you are, at least by name. So kind of give us a little bit of the story of how that came about and what led up to that.
Sure. That's a little bit scary to hear, I guess,
Well, I mean,
to be
you know,
known, but yeah, I
you
guess
can known for
it's true.
you can be known for crimes too. I'm not saying it's all
Sure.
good. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, so at this time, I was talking regularly with Earl Rodmacher, and
Okay.
he sent me
Give a
down
little
to a church.
context on who Earl is. So,
Yeah,
for those that haven't heard of Earl.
yeah. So I knew who Earl Rodmacher was because he had written the foreword for the Reign of the Servant Kings,
Yeah.
and that's where I knew his name, and I didn't really know much about him otherwise. Found him on Bible.org. You could fill out a form to email the contributors,
Oh, okay.
and so that's how I got connected with him. He was the president of Western Conservative Baptist Seminary, and then later named Western Seminary,
Yeah.
and that's in Portland, Oregon. And he is just a powerful teacher of free grace and hermeneutics.
Yeah.
He's with the Lord now, but he touched the lives of a lot of people. So
Yeah.
really thankful for him. He actually helped me find the church that I'm now serving as pastor.
Oh,
So
okay.
one of his disciples had been pastoring this church, and so that was a really great connection.
Yeah.
And
Now I've got a
also
question about Earl. So there's a commentary that I like. It's a 1-volume commentary. I think it's put out by Nelson, and Earl was, I think he was maybe the editor-in-chief of it. Is that ringing a bell for you?
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm wondering about that is, like, when I'm looking at that volume, it is pretty well free grace in a lot of places, but I'm wondering, like, what level. No, that's not how I want to say that. So let's just say I pick a random verse in that commentary. How likely am I to be hearing Earl's voice in that? Like, does that, and maybe you can't answer this, who knows, but does that entire commentary represent kind of Earl's teaching, or was he just kind of curating, you know?
Yeah, it was more curating. He definitely had
Okay.
a say, in terms
Yeah.
of trying to, help the authors to stay on a certain, perspective, which is going to be free grace
Yeah.
and dispensational, and all of
Yeah.
the all of the contributors are actually dispensational. But
Yeah.
the New Testament editor is Wayne House. And so you'll see
Okay.
him a lot in there. And I think the Old Testament editor was Ron Allen, but I may be wrong about that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so maybe I've got that wrong. Was Earl not the head
he was
editor
the
of
general
that?
editor.
Oh, he's
Yeah,
the general editor. Okay.
he was the
Okay.
general editor. So,
Yeah.
but every contributor is going to have his own voice. Just like
Yeah, sure.
I put out. I was the editor for 21 Tough Questions About Grace,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't have put in anything there that was blasphemous or something like that.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I let the authors have their own voice. I did sometimes encourage a gentler or more unity-inducing tone sometimes.
Yeah.
Because that was really important to me for the purpose of that book. So anyway, yeah, so it's kind of a similar situation, I think. At the same time as all this was going on, I was speaking sometimes with Bob Wilkin, and
Okay.
met Zane Hodges. I visited Victor Street Bible Chapel,
Yeah. Okay.
back when Bob and Zane were both serving as teaching elders there.
Yeah.
And Bob invited me to come and work for Grace Evangelical Society, which I did.
Yeah.
And I
What was
worked
your role there?
So I was like bottom,
Bottom,
of the
whatever the
totem
bottom
pole.
is.
Yeah, whatever needed to get done. I was in charge of that. Not in charge. I tried to do the work. One of my main things was trying to encourage the commentary contributors to get their submissions in.
Oh, okay. So
yeah,
you were
just
there in that
did some
phase.
with
That was a
editing
big project.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So
Did it get completed? I'm thinking it didn't get completed while you were there, right?
no, it didn't. It didn't get
Yeah.
completed then. I
Okay.
worked pretty hard on Zane Hodges' commentaries, his single volumes on James
Okay.
and First through Third John, to edit those down for the single volume commentary.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I did a lot of work on that too.
Yeah. Okay.
9/11 hit, and basically it caused some financial trouble, and so I was the low guy, so I got cut from there. But I came
didn't
back
realize that coincided with. Wow. Okay. So that was
Yeah.
so that'd be 01 then, I guess, right?
Yep.
01. Okay. Wow.
Yep. And then
Okay.
sometime in '02 is when I ended up leaving there. I guess I got laid off is probably the right way to put that,
Yeah.
just for financial reasons.
Yeah.
And then I worked there again from 11 to 13.
Oh,
And
okay. Okay.
yeah, and I was the director of publications, which was the
Yeah,
role
okay.
that
That makes sense because I was thinking, I thought you were involved more recently. So in '01, you were freshly out of college, it sounds like. Was that just a
yeah,
couple of years
I
after
was in
college?
college. Yeah, no,
You
I
were
was
in
in
college
college.
when, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I graduated
Yeah.
in '03.
Oh
Yeah.
three. Okay. Okay. So then
Yep.
11, you get the job, or you get a different job at Grace Evangelical Society,
Yep.
director of publications.
Yep.
Where is the commentary at that point? Is it still being worked on? I mean, that's like 10 years later. Was it
No, it
still
was
on
out
the
at that
table?
point.
It was
Yeah.
out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was out. So,
Yeah.
and I
Okay.
was working on the journal and some books that we were doing and that sort of thing. So,
Okay.
I also built a website that they had for a little while.
Okay.
They've updated it, which is a good thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I just did some things like that, and I left there again. I sort of got fired over doctrine. It was, that position was part of the purpose of it was to train up Bob's successor,
Ah.
and
Okay.
it became clear that we just kind of had a little bit of a different perspective
Okay.
um,
That
on the
just wasn't going to be
content of
you, I
faith.
guess. Huh?
Yeah, it just wasn't going to
Okay.
be me. So
Yeah.
they kept me on as a like a contract editor and some other things. So it's like I got fired, but I kept working there. But
Wow. Okay. Okay.
and so it was
So you
amicable
went from
and
a
all that.
W-2 to a W-9, I guess, or something
Yes.
like that. Your contract.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Would-
So I kept working
it,
there for a
is
little while.
it too
Yeah.
sensitive to ask about some of the particular issues that led to you being fired?
Yeah. So no, I mean it's not. The main thing just had to do with that I didn't agree with the perspective that GES was putting out about the minimum content of faith.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And
And that had been, let's see, if that was 2011, so there had already been some conflict over that within the free grace movement, right? I mean that had already
yes.
kind of become a known thing. What was it, like 2009 or so that became an issue?
I think it was 2006, actually.
2006.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that had been around for quite a while,
Yeah.
and my perspective on it has always been that we need to treat one another like Christian brothers and be kind to each other and to be sure that
Yeah.
we're I think sometimes people reframe the issue in a way to make it as dramatic as possible, and it becomes more divisive than it needs to be.
Yeah.
I do think that there is a distinction that's important between those views, but
Yeah.
it's been blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably a year ago or so, I asked, you and I were talking, and I asked some questions about that, and your response stuck with me. You said, those are questions I'm just not trying to answer right now. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It's sort of like, maybe there's a different priority when we're among Christian brothers, which is kind of what it sounds like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, leading on from there, so you're no longer with GES, although doing some contract work, but like where does the Grant story go from there?
Yeah, so I started a ministry called Bold Grace Ministries, and
Which we have the website up on the video version of this conversation right now. So
yeah, thanks. And it's been it's been kind of dead in terms of nobody's really been working it. So but for some time I was putting my whole full time into that, and the whole thing I was trying to accomplish there was to bring various free grace people together. We have this little tagline: "Unity through grace and truth." And
yeah.
So one of the first things we did was this book called 21 Tough Questions About Grace.
Yeah, I just had that pulled up. Let me see if I can get back to that. Yeah, I mean, keep talking. I'm gonna. Yeah, I've got an image of it here.
Yeah, there you go. So the purpose of that is we tried to find Free Grace people from a wide variety of
Yeah.
different groups, and I think we mostly accomplished that. We there's a couple groups in there that I think I wish were more fully represented than they
Yeah.
were, but
Well, yeah, I see
we wanted.
writers that are in the GES commentary. I see
Uh-huh.
um, some FGA folks. Yeah, this is a wide group. I've never looked through all the names that you have here. That's something. Was that? I guess you had some experience doing something similar, working on the commentary with GES. But was that a
Mhm.
challenge to to get everybody together, or did it fall together
Yeah,
easily?
it's a little bit of both. Some challenge, and some people were really excited about the concept.
Yeah.
And we told everybody we're focused on the things where we agree on here,
Okay.
and the
Yeah.
purpose of this is we want to be able to produce a book that we can hand to a non-free grace person, and it would be winsome. It would show a unified voice, and that they could have their questions answered. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How's it been received? I mean, was
Yeah,
that a,
yeah.
a
I
good
think
move?
people really like it. I I see that some people still sell it. Some of the authors are still out there kind of hawking it, which is great. I
Okay.
love seeing them represent that.
Yeah.
Charlie Bing has that on his website and takes it to
Okay.
conferences, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's pretty effective at what it tries to do. So
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that book.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, now you mentioned a name that probably some folks know, Charlie Bing. So
Hmm.
I think a lot of people probably associate you with a group that Charlie Bing is also associated
Hmm.
with. So kind of give us a little bit of that storyline there. What led into your association with the Free Grace Alliance and some of the folks there?
Yeah. So as I was working with the Bold Grace Ministries, I started to get to know Roger Fankhauser a little bit, and at basically when all the fighting popped off in about 2006, I withdrew from both groups and just
Ah, okay.
for a while, and I just said, I don't want to fight. I don't want to be part of the fight.
Yeah.
And FGA kind of stuck with that kind of fighting perspective for some time. There was some
Really?
leadership there that's all been moved out, but some people kind of came in and took over the group, and
Ah.
yeah, made it sort of a hostile place. But then that leadership was kind of all shown the door, thankfully.
Okay.
And
See, I hadn't heard that inside that I mean, I don't know a whole lot. We've done a couple of things with FGA conferences and stuff, but I haven't heard the inside story there that there was kind of a leadership change
Mhm.
with a leadership that was a little bit more aggressive. I mean, do
Yeah,
you feel like the leadership is such now that there could be movement towards unity between some of
yeah.
these groups, or I mean, is
Yeah,
that
there definitely could. I can definitely see that happening, and I think
really?
in little ways it is happening, and I think
Okay.
I think it's going to keep going that direction. So,
Man, that's good to hear. What
not
type
I
of
just want
stuff?
to
Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
just real quick. Let me just comment that I don't FGA is not going to budge on their doctrine.
Yeah,
they're not gonna fudge
yeah,
that, and I think that's good. But they are just they're unity minded. They want to have right relationships with our brothers and sisters in Christ, even when we
yeah,
disagree on some things.
yeah. Well, so what, as that leadership moved out that you were talking about,
Hmm.
that was, I mean, like, what was the vibe like once that had changed? I mean, was it kind of a gradual change? Was it completely different? And what were some of the outcomes of that?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of both. Some of it was pretty sudden, and Roger started talking to me and saying, "Hey, I want you to come back to FGA." And I said, "I don't want to be part of a group that's against another group, you know."
Mm, yeah,
But he was telling me, like, that's not what we're doing anymore. We're moving on from that. Those guys are gone. So come back and just come see. And I did, and I was very encouraged. I felt at home with the Free Grace Alliance. A couple years later, they asked me join the board, which I did, and was thankful to serve there, and I helped organize some of the conferences and that sort of thing. And then it became clear that they needed an executive director. And at this point, I'm starting to realize that FGA's purpose and Bold Grace's purpose are the same,
Okay.
And so, that's why I ended up taking the job as the executive director of the Free Grace Alliance. And I left the website up and everything for Bold Grace, but I haven't been managing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us the website for Free Grace Alliance. I think I know it, but I don't want to type it in wrong and get some weird thing.
Sure, it's just freegracealliance.com. Yeah.
Let's see. I'm pulling that up. So and it's
there you
very
go.
active. Lots of events going on. We've with Free Grace International, which is a ministry I'm with. We've done some stuff with y'all's. I think I just spotted your name on their recent magazine. So, so very, very active. So tell us a little bit about your time there. Like what? Now, and your title was what? Were you director or?
Yeah, executive director.
Executive director. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your time there. Like what was your vision and what were you hoping to see Free Grace Alliance accomplish?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think that it took a little bit of time for us to sort of figure out exactly what we were trying to do as a ministry. And in the meantime, what we were working on was trying to have some tangible tools and services that we could provide to people. And that looked like a magazine that we produced and some conferences. We really increased the regional conferences. And then we started to realize that the real thing that we need to be focused on as an alliance is reaching people who haven't been reached. Because the more we
reached,
spend,
as in completely no gospel at all, or just like
no gospel
lordship
at all.
circles, or okay.
Yeah,
so
no
missions
gospel at
basically.
all, missions. Yeah,
Missions. Okay.
Domestic and international.
Yeah.
And we also realized that there are a lot of Free Grace people internationally that we hadn't been connected with.
Yeah.
And so that took me to do a lot of trips overseas in the last year or so.
Yeah.
And I was able to preach at churches in Helsinki and London and Budapest and Geneva and South Africa and India and Ghana and we also attended a conference in Dubai. It was cool. We got to go and meet a lot of brothers and sisters in Christ who are Free Grace people. We got to share the gospel with a lot of people who maybe weren't Free Grace or didn't know at all. We did some street evangelism in Budapest, which was awesome. The folks there really don't know much about Christianity, but they're open to it. They want to talk about it when you reach out to them. So,
man, that's quite a bit of traveling. Like how many years does that represent? The places you just said, is that a period of years, or was that like in the last few months that you've been to those places?
Yeah, that's this last year. Yeah.
My goodness. Well,
1 year.
You're on the move. Wow.
Yeah, I have been. Not lately. I had a terrible Taekwondo accident, and I actually broke a bone in my knee and 3 bones in my shoulder.
Wow.
So for the last almost 2 months, I've been stuck at home. I'm either in a wheelchair or in bed. So it's kind of a
so
kind of a
you
mess.
referenced that, but I didn't know the nature of that. So were you in a tournament or something, or what was going on there?
Yeah, I was in the World Championships, and I was in. It was my last day. I was going to retire. I was going to retire, and I was doing something called combat sparring, which we spar with these little bats, and we hit each other with these little bats.
Okay.
And I was jumping across the ring to try to get the guy. I was down, and the time was running out. And it's interesting. I actually won the world championship in this event last year.
Okay.
and I was up against the guy who I beat in the championship
Oh,
match. And we had
yeah.
met each other. So I beat him then, and then we met each other at nationals, and he beat me in the
Wow.
championship at nationals, and then we were up against each other again. And he was about to beat me, and so I was kind of desperately trying to catch up, and I jump across the ring to get him, and I got him, but when my knee hit when my foot hit the ground, my knee just buckled, and
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and then I fell hard on my shoulder and dislocated it and broke some bones in there too.
Man, you must
So
have really had a leap. Is there a video online somewhere of that
there's
match?
not one online, and
Okay.
the people who took video said that it was pretty gruesome, so
Oh gosh.
they don't want to
Well,
look at
so
it.
I guess you can take some pride in the fact that it wasn't his it wasn't his weapon that shattered your knee or whatever. It was your own momentum.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah, it's the kind
How
of
how
thing that
long have you been
happens in your
doing how
40s.
yeah. Did you say Taekwondo? Is
Yeah,
that what you said it
Taekwondo.
was? How
Yeah,
how long have you been doing that?
it was about. I guess this was. I was working on my 6th year, so
6 year.
yeah,
Okay. Wow.
yeah.
So it's interesting. I want to just kind of like juxtapose. I mean, you're like a absolutist, but you also can kill with your bare hands. How do you put those two things together?
Yeah, so I always just looked at it as a sport, and
Yeah.
when we're sparring, we're wearing pads, and we're not trying to hurt each other. So
Yeah.
I got into it because my son was into it, and I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to do that with him, and yeah, and he still does it. Um, so we're both second-degree black belts. Um,
Wow. Do you ever see? I mean, have you ever been able to kind of take advantage of some ministry opportunities through the sport?
um, I built relationships, and I've been able to share the gospel with some people
Yeah.
through those relationships, but I haven't, had like preaching opportunities or anything like that.
Yeah. It'd be
Yeah.
awesome to like have a match going on while you're preaching. I mean, maybe at your church you could try that, let's as a demo. Maybe you could demo Jacob wrestling with the Lord or something. I don't know, but yeah. Okay, so let's
Yeah.
get back to your story. Well, that is your story
Hmm.
too, but let's get back
Sure.
to kind of your ministry story. So you're at FGA for how
Hmm.
long
I
as the
was, let's
director?
see, it's 4 years. Yeah.
4 years. Okay.
I became the director in 19. Yeah.
Okay. And so I think it's public knowledge that you are doing something new soon. I think some of
Yes.
that is still wrapped in mystery what you're going to be doing, but can you tell us kind of can you give us any information? Don't break confidence with anybody, but can you give us any information about the International Man of Mystery and what he's going to do next?
Yeah. So the next thing I'm doing is going to involve training pastors
Okay.
like internationally, mostly in
Yeah.
Africa. So
Okay.
there's a opportunity here, and I can't share too much details because the basically the funders are working on getting their funding together,
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
we're also waiting until I can walk again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. A vital part of the program is going to be movement, I
yes,
guess. Yeah.
yes. So but we've got about 5,000 students waiting
Wow.
for an accredited program
Wow.
to get them trained up, and they're putting me in charge of designing the curriculum, and
Okay.
I'll be doing some basically preparing course facilitators mostly, and
Yeah.
I'll be going around representing the schools. So
Wow. So if all goes well, you
mhm.
potentially not just you, the team could potentially see 5,000 free grace pastors come through this school just with their initial wave. I mean, is that
Yeah,
is this? It sounds like it's a school. Is the
yeah,
school free grace oriented, or do they just happen to have you on the team who is free grace, or are they free grace
yeah.
minded?
So the school was purchased by a couple of people who purchased it with the view towards making it a free grace school, and
Wow,
so
man, that's exciting. That's
yeah,
that's super cool. Wow.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty
It
exciting.
is
So
is okay. Is See, I know that you gotta keep some secrecy here. So just build the brick wall if I'm asking too many questions. But
Sure.
is there going to be an opportunity for other Americans to help support that effort and be involved in it in some way? I mean, maybe not people that will physically be there, but I mean, uh,
Yeah.
is it fully
Yeah.
funded? Or is there donations needed? Like, what if there's people that are excited? What might they be able to do once you're able to reveal it? Um, what kind of roles could people have in helping this?
Well, that's a great question. I think that the plan is for it to be self-funded once it's gets started,
Okay.
and the
Wow.
people who are working on getting it together are working on basically some business transactions that they're trying to wrap up to
Okay.
start the funding. They want to have 5 years of funding before we get started.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so I don't know if there's going to be a need for ongoing funding or not.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that the intention is that I will not need to raise support for the job, but that
Wow.
certainly could change if things
Yeah.
don't go well. Right now, I'm actually without a job, and I need to get started on preparing for this new thing. So,
Yeah.
I definitely could use any support that anybody wanted to toss my way in the short term.
Yeah.
You could do that at boldgrace.org.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
So,
Bold Grace. I had that up. So boldgrace.org. People can connect with you there, and that's
mhm,
probably a way they can also communicate with you as well, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me just toss out my email. It's probably a better way. It's is GHAWLEY316 at gmail.com. So,
Very good. Okay.
yeah.
Well, so I want to transition in the time that we've got. Thank you for sharing your story, Grant. Some exciting fight scenes in that story, but also just some amazing movement. We can kind of see how God's preparing maybe a whole new wave of something in the African continent.
hmm
Now, I want to talk a little bit more domestically now. It sounds like you may wind up being somewhere else sometime soon, but we have, in our ministry, we have a mind towards seeing unity, unity
hmm
among the brothers. And it's no secret that among grace ministries, free grace ministries, that there has been some conflict over the years. And we're really interested in trying to figure out a path towards peace, a path towards unity. And a verse that came to mind because someone mentioned Sean Lazar mentioned to me that this is a verse that was meaningful to you, Ephesians 4:3.
hmm
I thought maybe we could read that and then just chat a little bit about what it says to you, and maybe some ideas on how we could move toward move toward grace. What's your Bible translation of choice?
Usually New King James. Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I got that on my screen here. It's going to be alphabetical G. Everybody just watch me scroll. We're NIV, NKJV, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. What does that mean?
Yeah. So, can I talk about Ephesians just for a minute?
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So, in 1, 9, and 10, Paul lays out kind of the purpose of God's work with the world, like his eternal purpose, which is to gather together in one all things in Christ. And then as he goes through um, the next 3 chapters, he's explaining all the ways that God has worked to make that happen. And
Okay.
he talks about how he raised us up together, made us to sit together in the heavenly places in Christ, and we just kind of miss that whole together aspect of it
Yeah.
when we look at it. And he talks about how he's broken down the middle wall of separation and thus making peace. And he talks about how we are being built together into the dwelling place of God, this
Yeah.
temple. And then when we get into chapter 4, he starts to, explain, not just theologically but practically how this happens. And he starts with telling everybody, look, you gotta walk in a way that's worthy of your calling.
Hmm.
Um, And he's like, I beseech you. So he's like begging them, walk in a way that's worthy of your calling.
Yeah.
And then it's not, kind of a lot of the things that we typically think of as what a faithful walk looks like, but he says with lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. And so, a worthy walk with the Lord starts with an understanding that the Holy Spirit has created a unity in the body of Christ. And it's our job to humble ourselves and to, bear with each other in love and fight for that unity.
Wow.
That is what a worthy walk is.
Yeah. Wow. I often in these throw out odd allegories, but I'll tell you the one that came to mind is I watched recently a documentary of Michael J. Fox, who has Parkinson's disease, and he talks about this time where I believe it was his pinky first began to rebel against the body, in so to speak. His pinky was the first to he started to see twitches, and there was kind of this tone in how he talked about Parkinson's is like the body wants to do something and wants to be unified and wants to move in a certain way, but there's body parts that are fighting against the body and the mission of the body, the goal. I'm trying to go to the kitchen and my leg isn't cooperating or whatever. And that's kind of the image this gave me when you were talking about this, is that the Spirit has a unified mission and goal, and we can either be the body parts that kind of work in line with that or ones that rebel against that. I mean, does that resonate with you? Am I way off there?
Absolutely. No, you're right on track. And that's actually basically what he goes on to talk about later in chapter 4. And it's interesting because it's hard to see in the English, because we see this word equipping in chapter 4 when it talks about how he's given these different offices to the church, with apostles and prophets and pastor teachers and etc. Evangelists. I think he doesn't say prophets there, but the idea is these different offices.
Yeah.
And it says that they're there for the equipping of the saints for the work of ministry, but the word for equipping is actually, it's a medical term, and it's used for setting bones together or to set joints together.
Wow.
And so the whole point is that these people who are called to lead the church, their main role is to actually kind of set the body together so that it can heal and function like it's supposed to. And then it goes down and it talks about how, with these joints and ligaments, this is I think when he talks about joints and ligaments, he's not necessarily talking about people, but he's talking about this truth that brings us together, and that therefore what every joint supplies, what every single person, every part does its share, every person does its share in the body of Christ, it causes the growth that we're looking for the edifying of itself in love. So I mean the same concept. If you're broken off, or just even if you're out of joint with the rest of the body, you've got a problem and you can't function like you're supposed to.
Yeah. I think you can resonate with that, having recently broken bones. I mean, did you have a doctor reset your bones?
No, thankfully the bones were all in place.
Okay.
So yeah, I didn't have any displacement, so I'm probably not going to need any surgeries, which is just a miracle.
Yeah. So I have a reason for asking that. Let's imagine that moment where your bone was broken. Mm-hmm. Can you just imagine with me, how it would feel if a doctor started coming toward you with those wandering hands, wanting to grab hold of those broken places? I mean, like, what would that have felt like, and how would you have reacted?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, it would have been terrible. Actually, it's funny. There's a similar thing. My shoulder was out of place. It was dislocated. And so, we tried and did all these things to try to put it back in place while we were still there. And eventually they had me lay down on a table and dangle my arm. And I was trying to move it so that it would slide itself back in, but I couldn't do it by myself. And so they had a trainer come over, and he kind of gently moved my arm around until it popped right back into place. And while it was out, it just had this pain that was just unreal. But once,
Mm.
as soon as it slid back in, there was this relief that kind of goes through. And I think that this is similar to what we're seeing happen so much because the free grace community, just like the rest of the church, is so like everything's out of joint. People
Yeah.
people can't they can't get connected with each other because they've been dislocated, and
Yeah.
and there's no harmony. But
Yeah.
you see, as you talk to people, you find more and more people who are kind of sliding back into that place of understanding the value of the body and the purpose that we're all here for.
Yeah.
And when that happens, there's just
Yeah.
this relief and this like, okay, this is good.
Yeah.
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 And then it's not that the pain's all gone, but it just takes some time to heal.
Yeah. You know, the way I've been thinking about it, kind of leading up to talking to you is, um, you and me kind of run in different halves. Maybe I'll say different hemispheres of the free grace circle.
Hmm.
We call it a free grace circle, assuming that it's not a broken circle. But
Yeah.
but you and I kind of have for a while been sort of parts of two different parts. Although you've been in all hemispheres, it sounds like. I kind
Hmm.
of came up through just one hemisphere of it, and in my hemisphere, there's kind of an expectation that I would continue to be disjointed from Grant Hawley. I mean,
Hmm.
that's kind of an expectation. Now, nobody says that exactly,
Hmm.
but that's kind of the expectation that
Yeah.
you and I guess, maybe aren't supposed to talk or something. I don't want to turn it into a weird Romeo and Juliet thing here, but I mean, it's like Montagues and Capulets almost. It's like we're propagating something that okay, so I don't want to diminish the
Hmm.
theological content. I mean, I think those are conversations that we need to continue to have. But guess what you have to do to be able to have the conversation? You
Yeah,
have
you
to
got to
be
talk.
together to be able to talk. So,
Yeah.
so I think that when you see strong expectation for disengagement, I think that's
Hmm.
usually fear-based. And I
Hmm.
think a lot. Now, I'm not accusing anybody in particular, but I think just innately we find some dark comfort in disengaging because when you're disengaged, you don't listen to the other person and you can't be persuaded. You can't be persuaded to either find common ground or to change your mind. And so if you're trying to keep people from changing their mind, expect them to disengage from each other. But for me, I don't want that. I want, like yesterday, I talked to a friend who is a minister who is in the Fort Worth area who is not free grace. He's not in the free grace circle. He's never called himself free grace. He doesn't think of himself as free grace. And I talked to him about free grace.
Hmm.
And at the end of the conversation, guess what? He still wasn't free grace. But we had a
Yeah.
great talk, and we realized we have a lot of common ground. I mean, we agree on a
Yeah.
lot of things. And so, I don't know. Have you felt like do you resonate with some of what I'm saying, or is this just the Lucas mindset? I mean, have you felt that within
Yeah.
our free grace circles, and what do we do about it? I mean, how do we get practical about what this verse is telling us to do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Something I kind of wish would have happened when the theological difference popped up is that the folks on both sides of the issue would have gotten together and listened to each other's hearts and try to find out, like, really what is the concern here and how
Hmm.
can we move together in unity. And the concern on the GES side, at the time at least, was that we needed to be sure that we were promoting assurance of salvation from the beginning.
Okay.
And then the concern on the FGA side was, we need to be sure that we are including the death and resurrection of Christ.
Yeah.
And neither side was saying we should exclude the other content when we share the gospel.
Hmm.
But neither was either side saying, let's ensure that both of us are always sharing both aspects of the content.
Yeah.
And if we do that, then we can all be satisfied practically going forward, having unity in our gospel message. And that way everybody's gospel message would be the same. And the question would have just been, well, there's a hypothetical, situation
Yeah.
in which somebody believes this
Yeah.
and not this.
Yeah.
And but that hypothetical is not something to divide over if, practically speaking, we're all preaching the same gospel.
Yeah.
But I think that there just wasn't enough love for the unity of the body of Christ when these differences popped off, so
Yeah.
that people would be willing to humble themselves in that way.
Yeah.
And so I think that, practically speaking, the verse, chapter 4 of Ephesians, verse 1 and 2, tells us how to do it. We humble ourselves.
Yeah.
And we say, yeah, I have my beliefs. I agree with the FGA covenant. Okay, that's where I stand. I actually used to agree with GES's position, and I've moved to FGA's position. But standing there, I don't want to leave assurance out when I'm sharing the gospel. I want somebody
Yeah.
from the very beginning of their Christian life to understand that they are absolutely secure and that they have eternal life, which can never be lost.
Yeah.
And I will share that every time I share the gospel, and I do share that every time I share the gospel, but I need
Yeah.
to accept other people who are doing the same, even if we have maybe a difference on this hypothetical.
Yeah.
So,
And I think on the other side, in actual practice, I mean, I think you're right. There's a hypothetical that could someone, I'll just say the other side of the debate. There's this hypothetical in play that could someone have saving faith without yet considering whether or not Jesus died on the cross or rose from the dead. On that side of the debate, they would say hypothetically that might happen, but in actual practice, I've yet to come across people that don't include that in the message that Jesus.
yeah, I have seen it.
Have you?
Yeah, I have seen it, and I think there's a gospel tract that's put out there by one of the major organizations that doesn't at all talk about the death and resurrection of Christ.
Okay.
And I just think that's a mistake. And even if theologically you agree that it's not an absolute necessity, which that's where we would differ. But I just think it's a mistake not to put the full message out there.
Yeah.
But I just think that there was, the folks who were putting that track together might have been trying to make a point, that you don't have
Yeah.
to have that stuff. And I think that was a mistake.
Yeah. Let me workshop an idea with you. So obviously I'm coming from like my trajectory and my history has been on the other side, that has often been accused of being a crossless gospel. But I don't want to be in a situation where I'm ever telling someone don't talk about the cross, don't talk about the resurrection, because it's central. But something has occurred to me, and I'm pretty sure other people have thought of this, and maybe you can give me some ideas on kind of how to follow this line of thought. But let's say hypothetically that somebody shares the gospel and they say, they believe in Jesus, but then when you try to identify which Jesus they're talking about, they say, "Oh, I'm not talking about the Jesus that died and rose from the dead. I'm talking about a different Jesus." I think even people on the other side of the debate, let's call it the GES side of the debate, I think even they would acknowledge that the death and resurrection, I can't speak for them, but I'm going to assume that they would say that the death and resurrection of Jesus is required at least as an identifier, as he is the one who died and rose from the dead. And in a case where you might be talking about, there might be confusion, again, hypothetically, confusion about who we're talking about, that is the best identifier of who the Jesus we're talking about is. But what's your sense on that? Like, would that be kind of a back door even for the GES side of the debate, to maybe have some consideration for this being a type of required in a sense of like as an identifier?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. That really might be a good solution. I right now I'm not as much in a place where I'm hoping for a theological solution as much as I am a practical one.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So
Yeah,
yeah, so tell me about that.
yeah,
You're thinking that it sounds like you're saying that let's let both organization or both sides, both hemispheres retain their theology and yet
hmm
get along. Is that what
yeah,
you're saying?
yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. I think that if we can say from a practical standpoint that we all agree, and I think maybe there needs to be like a free grace statement, like kind of
Yeah.
like the Chicago statement on inerrancy, but a free grace statement that says that we all agree that when we share the gospel, we will work to ensure that the hearer understands the message that everlasting life is a free gift which can never be lost, and that it was purchased by Jesus Christ dying on the cross and confirmed by his resurrection.
Wow.
And I think
That
that
feels doable. That feels like
yeah, we
something
could
we
all
could
do that.
do.
Yeah, absolutely, we could all do that, and that way
Have you
nobody even has to
proposed
change
this
their
in any
theology.
official Have you proposed this in any official ways or any official places?
No, I talked to Sean Lazar about it one time, and I think we're getting ready to I think work on a book on unity together with a few other authors,
Yeah.
and I think Sean and I are going to co-edit it.
Yeah. So maybe that'd
But
be part of
maybe
that.
we can put it in the front,
Yeah.
um, and
I
maybe put it
almost wonder
online
if
so
there
more
would
people
be
can
a
sign it.
call for like a summit, a
Hmm
meetup of people who have disagreed, and boy, I mean, it could be a raucous party. I mean, it could be a wild thing, but it also could be,
Yeah,
like you said, a resetting the joint. You know,
yeah,
um, I don't know. Wow,
yeah.
that's interesting.
hmm
So it feels like what you're saying, and I think I agree with this, is that the one, I'm calling them hemispheres out of this conversation. The one hemisphere says, you guys are leaving out Jesus's work. The other hemisphere is saying, you guys are leaving out uh, basically eternal security,
hmm
or a belief in eternal security.
hmm
But I think what you're saying is neither side is against sharing that in a practical sense. They may say
Yeah,
hypothetically that's not required, but they would be willing to come together on a practical sense. And many of them
yeah,
probably are already doing it, save the example maybe that you mentioned with that tract. But I
yeah,
mean, is that kind of what you're getting at? Is like there's
yeah.
overlap that has a potential practical solution.
Yeah, I do think that there are some people, for whatever reason, are not really interested in that, but
Yeah,
maybe from either side, and
yeah,
but I think that that's a small number of people,
yeah,
and there's definitely an opportunity, I think, for us to have a practical solution that I don't think anybody would. Not too many people would have a problem with standing next to a brother who has a difference on a hypothetical,
yeah.
but whose gospel message is the same.
That's interesting. Yeah, and that's a good point. That a lot of the things that are probably debated are in the hypothetical category.
hmm hmm
Theoretical things that potentially could come up, but maybe don't actually come up a lot of the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Wow.
and
Okay.
certainly don't need to if we all agree. What we're
Yeah.
going to do going forward.
Yeah. So we focus on our orthopraxy, knowing that
Hmm
our orthodoxy might be slightly different in
Yep,
various circles.
yep.
Wow. Yeah, that's boy. Grant. I love practical. I love practical, and that feels practical, and it feels like something that we could accomplish. It also feels like I've taken up about an hour of your life, which I try not to do more than that. So I'd say why don't we wrap on that? I feel like that's a good positive note. Any final thoughts or ideas? How listeners can be praying for you and get connected? Maybe give us kind of a final paragraph.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to be speaking at the FGA Regional coming up this Saturday in Burleson. If anybody wants to come see me, I can
Cool.
see what I look like in my wheelchair.
Oh, are you actually doing it from your wheelchair?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
I don't have
wow.
any other option. So,
Wow.
yeah, but also
Hypothetically,
just
let's say that you entered a Taekwondo tournament in a wheelchair. I think you'd win because nobody will hit somebody in a wheelchair.
that's
Wow,
funny.
man.
Yeah,
Okay, well, cool. Well, conference coming up, and I guess
yeah,
we
and
can be
then
praying for your new endeavors. That
yeah,
a little bit
thanks.
mysterious, but I'm sure you'll. So, how will you announce Like, will that go out on social media eventually, or
Yeah.
when will we find out something about that?
Yeah, as soon as everything's official, I'll post it on social media, and they're thinking, when we make it official, I'm going to hit the ground running. I'll probably be going to Kenya first. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'll let everybody know. I'm on Facebook. I don't use it very much, but I do try to use it to help people know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool. Well,
So,
thank you so much, Grant. I can say I consider you a brother, and
amen.
I'm excited to be talking about how we might bring, let me quote the verse, how we might keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Thank you so much
Amen.
for being with us.
Yeah. Thanks. Love you, brother. Take care.
All right. Love you too, man. See you.
See ya.
Okay. If you'll stay on just a... Oh, he's gone.